Hello everyone, welcome to this presentation on writing skills. This group is composed by my dear colleagues Verónica Cabral, Gloria Garay, Lucía Galan, Paula Skills-Bernachea, and me, Lourdes Bernachea. Now, Vero is going to start with the introduction.
Thank you, Lourdes. Well, I am going to start with the introduction. Writing has always been part of applied linguistics. However, in the early years of applied linguistics, writing was not considered to be one of the proper goals of language learning. In the latter half of the 20th century, writing or written discourse and the teaching of writing began to receive significant attention as an important area of inquiry within applied linguistics. With the development of the field of second language writing, the act of writing also became an important focus of research and instruction in first language and second language writing. More recently, second language writing has evolved into an interdisciplinary field of inquiry involving many related fields, including applied linguistics and composition studies, which are themselves highly interdisciplinary. Aspect of writing. Writing is one of the three modes of linguistic expression and communication, along with speaking and signing. The three of them are all manifestations of language users' knowledge, perspective, and communicative competence. Regarding the process of writing, it involves a series of highly complex cognitive activities that takes place in response to a rhetorical situation, also known as a complex web of relationship among the elements of writing. That includes the writer, the reader, the text, and reality. Those relationships are constantly shifting, which means that writers and readers may develop different perceptions of any particular rhetorical situation. Writing involves three different aspects. The relational one, which is the relationship among the elements of writing. The strategic one, which is the use of various strategies for developing and communicating ideas. And the textual one, which is the use of available discourse repertoire. I will explain the relational aspect of writing. As I said, writing is always embedded in a rhetorical situation, which is a particular social and material condition under which written expression and communication takes place. The writer's task is complicated by the varying and ever-changing nature of the elements of writing. The writer is more than just the physical person who creates the text. Writers are not only presenting their view of reality, but also constructing their discursive identity, which may affect the way the text is read and responded to. However, writers do not have full control over their discursive identity because ultimately the resulting image of the writer is co-constructed by the writer and the reader with the mediation of the text. The reader is not a simple concept either. Like the writer, the reader may be one person or many. In most cases, the writer is the first reader who provides comments, asks questions, and makes suggestions for revision. In some cases, such as private diaries, the writer may be the only intended reader. Readers may play different roles, such as that of a friend, a coach, a critic, and those roles may belong to real audiences addressed by the writer. But they may also be imagined roles invoked in the text. This imagined audience role is invoked by the content as well as the form. The text is also complicated. Although each text is unique and in some ways, a text cannot be understood only in terms of itself because the text is always situated in a network of other texts to which it may respond explicitly or implicitly. Other texts also provide a pool of discursive features that may be appropriated by the writer in order to achieve similar rhetorical effects, and by the reader in interpreting the text. In many cases, each local discourse community develops its own networks of texts that are shared by its members. Reality may seem stable, but it can be interpreted in many ways also. Although there is a reality people can interact with physically, reality is also socially and discursively constructed, so that people understand, communicate, and agree upon versions of reality through language and other semiotic systems. Knowledge is not simply discovered or represented, but also transformed in the process of writing. In conclusion, writing is a complex phenomenon because writers have to negotiate all the elements of writing: the writer, the reader, the text, and reality, and construct written discourse accordingly. In order to manage this complex process, writers adapt, develop, and use various strategies. And Lourdes will continue with this explanation.
Well, thank you, Vero. The second aspect of writing is the strategic one, which is concerned with the use of different strategies for developing and communicating ideas. As teachers, it is relevant to know about this strategy because it enables us to teach writing rather than teach about writing. So now let's focus on the writing process, the steps. The first one is planning. The writer has to assess the situation and identify the aim of writing by paying attention to one of the elements of writing that Vero already mentioned. The writer may also identify and develop ideas by focusing on one or more of the elements, such as exploring or discovering the writer's feelings or beliefs, looking for disagreement or conflict in the community, examining reality through reading or observation, choosing a form of writing, among many others. Once the topic is identified, the writer needs to explore, develop, and sometimes redefine the topic. There are some strategies for exploration. For example, the journalist questions who, what, when, where, why, and how. Perhaps reading on the subject may also be a way of exploring topics and generating responses. The use of diagrams for mapping out our thoughts and ideas, among other strategies that we can use. The second step is drafting. Drafting can be a challenge for writers because factors such as the writer's self-image and the anxiety about writing can make the writing task overwhelming and sometimes resulting in writing inhibition, also known as the writer's block. There are some strategies to face this situation. For example, some writers may choose to ignore one of the elements of writing. Some may draw on their spoken language or on their knowledge of other genres to develop and revise written text. Some others may also translate from text generated in their L1. We can use different strategies. Step number 3, revising. Writers often revise, modify, reorganize their work by rearranging, adding, and deleting content. They usually revise based on comments and suggestions from colleagues. Some writers let their writing sit for a while in order to see them from a different perspective. Step number 4, editing and proofreading. The processes of checking and changing grammatical and stylistic features. is also an important part of the revision process. Having another writing's feedback in this stage can also be helpful. Step number 5, publishing. In this last step, the final writing is shared with the group. Now let's focus on the textual aspect of writing. It is the material realization of the other two aspects of writing. Writers do not simply encode ideational meaning, that is to say, the meaning of their ideas, but they also create textual meaning, which is the meaning that helps the reader navigate through the text, as well as the interpersonal meaning that is connected with the relationship between the writer and the reader. The knowledge of how these meanings can be constructed through discourse features is an important part of the writer's competence. So whereas a spoken discourse achieves functions through prosodic features, written discourse do the same through typographical features such as punctuation marks, capitalization, italics, boldface, font sizes, and indentation. In formalized situations, writers have to rely more heavily on structured means, for example, nominalization, as well as discursive features as the use of hedges and boosters. Writers also construct their discursive identity or voice by using different written discourse features. As we know, writing involves much more than knowing about morphology, lexis, and syntax. Sentences need to be cohesive, and the whole text also needs to be coherent. A cohesive text is not necessarily coherent. Research in the subject matter show that the standard of coherence may vary across languages and cultures. For this reason, the assessment of the quality of writing requires an understanding of the context in which it was written, and especially the audience for which it was intended. So now Gloria is going to talk about second language writing.
Thank you, Lourdes. Well, definition of the second language writers. When we talk about the terms of the second language writers, we refer to anyone who is writing or learning to write in a language different from their mother tongue. However, we need to know that the limit between them is unclear. As where the native speaker have different target language and dialect, the difference between culture may produce interference in the second language writers. On account of the second language writers learning to write while they are develop a structure and use the second language. Therefore, all writers continue to develop their language proficiency and general knowledge because of the difference between first language and second language. When we refer to the second language writers, we need to know that we have two groups. The first group, the English as a second language, defines students who are studying English as speaking English, country like the United Kingdom, United States of America, and Australia, for example, where the students may develop their capacity. The other group, the English as a foreign language, define students who are learning English as a second language in a country that English speaking is not prevalent. Second language writing, theory, research, and pedagogy. In this section, we will pay attention to the second language writing because the linguistic interference with profession. We focus on English as a second language in this part. During the last 60 years, some research has been realized in this area. Some second language writing has been developed with theory, research, and pedagogy. The process evidence that second language writing requires diverse perspectives, models, and practice to create a successful writing. The control composition is a branch of the audiolingual approach to second language teaching because both share two of the central principles. The first, that language is a speech, And the second, that learning is formed by behavior psychology. Another important point in this linguistic analysis of the second language writers is the linguistic analysis of the second language writers' text, involving constructive analysis, which compare the grammar structure different between two languages, in this case, English and Spanish. This variance may produce troubles for second language writers. Also, the error analysis, which located and categorized errors. The control composition classroom, the teachers applied a control program of systematic formation so as to avoid errors, which may produce interference from the first language of the second language writers, as well as the control composition writing function activity is implemented for reinforcing language skill. Therefore, students acquire some strategies, grammar structures to create successful text, and the teacher role is an editor privileging linguistic features. The paragraph approach helped to develop the knowledge of the second language writers, as well as the writing realize more than grammatical sentence. Also, this approach emphasized the importance of the organization of the text and sentence. Moreover, the notion of constructive rhetoric refers to culture and linguistic backgrounds that change culture by culture. In addition, the constructive rhetoric focuses on the culture, thought, patterns, and the interference it may produce in the second language writers. Hence, the success of writing communication on the writers rather change between collectivities and individualists. To sum up, learning to write requires different strategies and developing skills, as well as identifying, internalizing, and reproducing these patterns. Then the text is made and developed through complex discourse structures. Now, Lucía will present process approach.
Thank you, Gloria. So I'm going to talk about the process approach. It emerged as a response to the dissatisfaction with the approaches explained by Gloria before, the composition, the control composition, and the paragraph pattern approach, as it was believed that those were prescriptive models that didn't encourage thought. So through this view, the composition process is considered recursive, exploratory, and generative, and as a way to expand and express meaning. So instead of imposing organizational patterns and syntactic and lexical constraints, the writing teacher should guide the writing process, bearing in mind that it is the content that determines form and not the other way around. So in this view, the focus is on the writer and on the process, that is to say, on the strategies involved in writing. The main goal of this approach is to help students develop strategies for getting started, drafting, revising, and editing. The stages of writing that have been previously developed by Lourdes are of great importance for this approach to writing. The writing teacher should encourage students to engage themselves in these processes of pre-writing, writing, and rewriting, where planning, drafting, revising, and editing are major strategies in writing. There has been some controversy in this approach, as there are no major differences in L1 and L2 writing, and this is why some scholars have criticized their practical problems and omission problems. In this context, then, scholars noticed that there should be a shift in the focus on the writer that was before, and now there is a need to focus on the reader, specifically in academic and professional discourse communities. So this genre-based approach was proposed by instructors of English for academic purposes, as they noticed that readers needed to know and become aware of how to read academic texts. The research focuses mainly on the types of writing, that is to say narrative, descriptive, or argumentative, and the type of texts, especially academic genre. Just to name a few: summaries, laboratory reports, research papers, dissertation, articles, and more. One concept that is key and major to this approach is the developing genre awareness. That is to say, helping students become aware of the audience, the purpose of the text, and the expectations of the audience. There is a concept, a term developed by Professor Swales, that is rhetorical consciousness raising. That is to say, noticing genre structure, styles, citation forms, and particular phraseology used in specific genres. So instead of focusing on what is said, we should focus on how it is said. And to do that, we can use two main techniques. One is to help students get the big picture, that is to say, ask themselves, is this text condensed or elaborated? How is the use of the personal pronouns in this particular context? Which pronouns do they use? And then, on the other hand, we say we have using corpora, for example, Google Scholar, as a resource to recognize patterns, noun phrases, and collocations that could be useful for particular genres. Finally, then teaching genre, we can use the cycle approach. That is to say, we start by analyzing particular genres, raising awareness, then acquisition, finally achievement to start again. More analyzing will bring about awareness, and so on and so forth. Now Paula will finish our presentation.
Thank you, Lucía. There are a number of important issues in second language writing that transcend the traditions described by my colleagues. These ones include programmatic, contextual, disciplinary, and political issues. A number of programmatic issues have been addressed in this research, such as writing conferences, workshops, writing about literature. However, the one issue that has received by far the most recognition is the assessment of second language writing, which has been written about from a different number of perspectives. The first one includes test types, specifically indirect or objective ones, which measure students' knowledge about a subject, and direct tests, in which students are asked to complete some sort of authentic action, for instance, answering an essay question. Another basic issue is text rating or grading. Here, issues such as rater training, rater judgment, and the difference between rating done by individuals with and without experience with second language writers is being held. Also, central are questions of test validity and reliability. In addition, a number of variables that could potentially affect ratings have been explored. These ones include linguistic variables, rhetorical variables, and the writer's subject matter knowledge, cultural expectations, nationalities, reading comprehension, and the amount of reading done in both their first and their second language. And finally, some some specific language writing tests have been developed, deployed, and critiqued. For example, writing proficiency exams, entrance and exit exams, and placement exams have been described, but more specifically, the test of written English, TWE, the English as a second language composition profile, and the writing subtests of the International English Language Testing Services, which is also known as IELTS. So when it comes to teaching writing, few upper level faculties shoulder such responsibilities, and most tend to relegate these tasks to lower level faculties or colleges in the English department. Due to the lack of a specific training for this and the time-consuming, labor-intensive nature of writing courses, these are passed on to part-time writing instructors or teachers. Even though most of them hold master's degrees in TESOL, some are not prepared to handle the overwhelming essay grading task, may not be fully competent to respond to students' writings, and even their own writing proficiency is questionable. To conclude with, the current situation in second language writing studies is one of reflection on and re-examination of basic assumptions about the nature of second language writing, of rejecting easy answers to complex problems, and of realizing that there will be no particular approach or procedure that will actually work with all people in all places at all times. That's why professionals are beginning to seize the opportunity to escape the confines of a particular tradition, to resist simplistic methods of teacher training, to reflect critically on what research means, and to use their knowledge of theory and the results of inquiry to decide for themselves what makes sense for their students, for their objectives and teaching styles, and for their instructional contexts.
So this is the bibliography that we consulted to create this presentation. It was suggested by Professor Virginia, and also some extra bibliography that we found in the research that we did.
Thanks for watching. If you found this information useful, like this video. If you want to comment, please do it below. And if you want to find more videos about these kind of topics, please subscribe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.